Our topic tonight centers on the Second Amendment, which states a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Given that a growing number of politicians in the highest offices in America consistently mischaracterize the original intent of the Second Amendment and the importance of its application today, it is up to we the people to understand and protect this fundamental right. In that spirit, we assembled a panel of experts to explore the nexus between the Second Amendment and public safety. Our format tonight is going to be pretty simple. First, we'll introduce the panelists. Then we'll hear opening remarks from the panelists, up to about 3 minutes each. Then there will be questions from your moderator, about 20 minutes given to that. Then we'll take questions from the audience for another 20 minutes. Finally, we'll hear closing remarks from the panelists, again, probably about 3 to 5 minutes each. And we have a solid panel tonight. We want to give everyone an opportunity to speak to each question. So we're going to ask speakers to keep their general responses to a couple of minutes each during the Q&A portion. We've dedicated ample time to Q&A tonight, but we also want to provide opportunities to offer closing thoughts. So in the interest of time, we may end Q&A before we get to everyone. Apologies in advance. However, we invite our panelists to stay for informal discussions at the end, time permitting. We have this room until 9 p.m., so that shouldn't be a problem. Now allow me to introduce our panelists. Joshua Alvarado. Joshua is an Army veteran who served in the Iraq War. He is currently running to unseat a Democrat state senator from District 27, which includes parts of Arlington Heights, Woodland Meadows, Mount Prospect, Buffalo Grove, and Des Plaines. Josh has a studio in Bloomingdale and 2 YouTube channels, Second and Unvet and Standing Against Tyranny. He is a father of 4. Please welcome Joshua Alvarado. Frank Bhakti. After graduation from law school, Frank embarked on a 27-year career as a special agent with the FBI, serving the Los Angeles and Chicago field offices. In Los Angeles, he investigated cases of domestic terrorism and later was a member of the Violent Crimes Major Offenders Unit, eventually becoming the coordinator of the Los Angeles Safe Streets Task Force, which was created in the wake of the 1992 Rodney King riots. Upon his transfer to Chicago in 1997, Special Agent Bhakti investigated gang enterprises and retired as the coordinator of the Chicago Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is comprised of over 100 investigators representing 15 local, state, and federal agencies. Frank and his family have been residents of Geneva for 25 years. Please welcome Frank. Jeff Bodine. Jeff graduated from West Aurora High School in 2003, went on to study criminal justice. He was sworn in as a Kane County Sheriff's Deputy in 2007 and has been working on midnight patrol for the past 15 years. He and his wife, Ashley, reside in Sugar Grove. They have a 3-year-old son. On a related note, Jeff happens to be running for Kane County Sheriff in this next election, with some strong opinions regarding the Second Amendment on that age. Welcome, Jeff. Rachel LaRue. Rachel is a U.S. CCA firearms instructor and range safety officer. She is also a trailblazer in combat sports as a multimedia personality, model, radio personality, and podcaster. The CEO of Rachel Blaze Ambassador Combat Sports Incorporated. She is also the creator of Unity Fighters Foundation, a nonprofit organization, and a self-described mama bear who got off the sidelines after the last election to seek truth and get involved in the community. She became a precinct committee woman in 2021 and is currently running for precinct 17 in Yorkville. Mother of 3 and grandmother of 3, Rachel is a pro 2A, constitutionally minded pioneer and patriot who loves freedom, God, and country, who will fight if need be, and is dedicated to being a light in the world. Please welcome Rachel LaRue. And we also have tonight Mike Langston. Mike was born and raised in Aurora and is a lifelong resident of Illinois. He served 28 years in law enforcement and retired from the Aurora, Illinois PD as a police commander, primarily working in special operations, addressing gangs, guns, drugs, and violent crime, and Aurora's special response team. Mike also served in high-risk security operations as a dignitary and VIP personal security protection officer in the government and private sectors. In addition to being a certified civilian firearms instructor, Mike is a master firearms instructor for law enforcement, military, and nuclear security forces, as well as certifying firearms instructors in law enforcement, military, and security professionals. He has served as expert witness in court testimony more than 500 times for criminal street gangs, police and firearms treaty, investigations, narcotics, and covert and tactical operations. An advocate of Second Amendment issues for nearly 50 years. In 2008 and 2010, Mike was able to attend the United States Supreme Court hearings in Washington, D.C. on the D.C. versus Heller and McDonald versus Chicago hearings. Please welcome Mike Langston. Welcome again to all of our panelists. Thank you for being here, sincerely. We're going to go straight into our opening remarks. We'll start at the far end of the table, and you guys can just pass the microphone down as now it continues working. So for opening remarks, all I ask is that you please tell us your thoughts on the Second Amendment and public safety in 2022. Kicking off.
I am so bad at this, you guys. I'd rather just sprinkle the top of my lungs.
Do that. Do that.
Okay. My thoughts are, especially with what's going on today, everyone should be able to be getting their concealed carry license here in Illinois. If you're not, I would suggest that you do so. I would not want to be unarmed, unprotected in what's going on currently today. And also, if you're also interested, you should always get involved with your county boards because they also have the ability, like in Kendall County, we just were able to do a 2A resolution so that we can prevent the state from coming in and trying to confiscate our guns. So our Kendall County is a sanctioning county. Get yourself involved county level at all aspects, find out what's going on. Obviously you have a group here, they'll notify you, let you guys know what laws they're passing. JB Pritzker is passing laws in the middle of the night while everybody is sleeping, nestled into their beds. And you have no idea what's snuggled into these 300,000 pages of bills that they're trying to pass. And 2A is one of the biggest ones that they're trying to make sure that we have issues here in Illinois not having. So make sure you guys get involved. I got myself involved. I was anti-gun. I'm not gonna lie. When I first started, I was anti-gun. My kids didn't play with guns. Now I am very active with guns. I can't even tell you how many I own, but that's a whole other story. But it's just really important. It's your constitutional right to be able to bear arms, protect your families, and if something were to happen here in our state or in our country, we should be able to fight and protect our country.
That's right.
So, as introduced, Joshua Alvarado, Sergeant First Class retired U.S. Army. I'm running for state senate in the 27th, right? It's way up north from here. It took me like an hour and a half to get here, hour 20 to get here, whatever. But for myself, right, exercising our rights are super important, right? The Army sent me all over the country, and almost every other state, we could just go do a small background check and walk out with a firearm. Here in Illinois, that's not the case, right? Here in Illinois, we gotta get a FOID card. I promise you, when I get to Springfield, that'll be one of the things that I'm trying to get rid of, because it shouldn't be, right? We should not have that here in our great state. But you know, I think one of the things that like a lot of we fail on is not teaching young people about firearms. For myself, I do. I have 4 small children: a 9, an 8, a 6, and a 5-year-old. Every single one of them shoot with me and shoot regularly. My daughters shoot better than a lot of grown people, and they're 4 and 5, 4 and 5. Yes, 4 and 5, and they shoot better than a lot of grown people. You know, training is the most important thing, right? In the military, we train all the time. I understand like it's expensive to train, you know, us as civilians. Now, I want to continue to shoot as much as I did prior. Can't, it's so expensive, but find ways, right? So that's the brief.
Good evening. I think I learned a
lot through my career in regards to what law enforcement deals with firearms out on the street. Most of it ends up being the negative side. Gangs, guns, drugs, violent crime that the police officer sees gives him a different perspective on society. Certainly in today's world, we're starting to see more and more random crime that's touching people, carjackings, home invasions, attacks on the street, things of that nature. And the police officer now is seeing the perspective in a different light in regards to how the Second Amendment was originally intended. And that is it actually wasn't about self-defense. It wasn't about hunting. It wasn't about just simply owning a firearm. It was about the ability, number one, to protect ourselves from a government that becomes tyrannical. Number two, some foreign nation that attempted to attack our nation. And all those other things, self-defense, hunting, whether you chose to collect firearms or whatever, all those things were given to the framers of the Bill of Rights at the time they wrote the Constitution and added the Bill of Rights after that. So the original intent, the Second Amendment, really comes from that aspect of it. But in today's world, we have to look at how that is practically applied in the laws that are written and in your everyday life. If you go out there and become involved in a situation where you have to use a firearm, whether it's to defend yourself, one of your loved ones, or take some other type of action. So I have to add something to the conversation and the discussion in regards to what you're able to do out there on the street, as well as to understand that law enforcement has a role that sometimes may not be directly aligned with what you think it is in regards to investigating criminal acts that involve firearms. But the majority of the rank and file law enforcement, by huge numbers, are well behind the actual Second Amendment intent. So understand that and over to the discussion.
Good evening. I just want to add to what was just said. In my experience with the FBI, I was always on either the Los Angeles Police or Chicago Police Task Force, first in my entire career. One thing I could always count on was not only the officers having strong Second Amendment beliefs that I think align with ours, but more importantly, prosecutors. In Los Angeles, they're called district attorneys, here they're called state's attorneys, same thing. The problem that I see, and I work now in People's Republic of Cook County, I just carry a different badge. What's disheartening to me is the relationship, the deterioration of the relationship, in fact, destruction of the relationship between state's attorneys like Kim Fox and others in New York, and San Francisco, and Los Angeles, who demonize guns but fail to prosecute the bad people who are using the guns. And I can tell you in Cook County, there are people who are being arrested tonight, driving in vehicles that have guns. Chicago police are doing their job. They're arresting these individuals, taking the guns out of the cars. When they go to charge these individuals for gun possession, the state's attorney's office drops those charges and releases these people back out on the street. And it allows the Kim Foxes of the world to say guns are the problem. Look at all these guns. Well, no, guns aren't the problem. The problem are the people in our major cities who are abusing guns and are being released every Sunday. It's a revolving door. The Chicago police, talk to any Chicago police officer, he will tell you it's very disheartening when he arrests people, risks his life to arrest someone on a gun charge, and before the ink is dry on his report, that person is back out on the street buying another gun. So, I think that what we need to focus on are making sure that we, fortunately, in San Francisco and Los Angeles, it looks like those DAs are going to be recalled. No such movement here in Chicago for whatever reason. We need to bring back the partnership between the police officer on the street and the local state's attorney. They should be joined at the hip and enforcing, putting the bad people in jail who abuse guns, but not demonize the guns themselves. And I just want to leave you guys with one last plug. If you want to see how bad things are in Chicago, you're not going to see this in the Tribune, the Sun-Times. Write down this website. It's called CWB Chicago. CWB as a boy, Chicago. It is a blog that's updated sometimes 3 times a day. The stories that you will read there of what's happening overnight in Cook County will knock your socks off. And yet these stories never make it into the press. It's really disheartening what our prosecutors in Cook County have done to basically turn the city back over to criminals. I hope we can correct that.
Hey, everybody, glad to be here. I wanted to expand on the comment about the FOID card. The FOID card is unconstitutional. Last year or the year before, there was actually a judge down south in Illinois that tossed the case for Lee. They got charged with a misdemeanor, no FOID. In his ruling, he said that it was unconstitutional, which it is. Also, I would like to expand on what this gentleman said. 80 to 90%, in my opinion, of police are pro Second Amendment. There are a few, I'd say 10% or less, that are anti-gun for the public, so that's good. We also need strong prosecutors that are tough on crime. That's very important. I've got 15 years at the sheriff's office. I'm pro-Constitution, especially Second Amendment. Let's give you a little some statistics. As of last year, there was 434 million guns in the country. There's probably 450 million guns in the country today. So we're closing in about 500 million guns. There's 70,000 shootings every year in the United States that include about 20,000 murders. Most of those are gang related, and many of those are from stolen guns. There's also I've seen statistics ranging from 20,000 to 200,000 guns are stolen each year in the United States by criminals. That includes gun stores, car burglaries, and residential burglaries. So the fact is, we're not going to take guns away from citizens. We're not going to allow citizens to only have 10-round magazines. We should prosecute the criminals to keep them in prison. We should let them out a couple hours later, toss the cases. There's 3,100 counties in the United States, so there's probably around 3,000 to 3,100 sheriffs. Sheriffs are really important. Sheriffs are probably the most important elected official, in my opinion, because if you have 3,000 Republican constitutional leaning sheriffs in the United States, all this stuff stops. My platform is I want to make King County a Second Amendment sanctuary county. We're not limiting magazines. We're not limiting rifles. We're not doing it. The federal government, the state government, they're not going to run roughshod over us. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, Roy. I guess we can just leave the talking stick where it is. We'll just go with that for now. All right, so moving into the Q&A portion, I'll start with a couple of questions from the table here. First question is a two-part question. We'll start with maybe a softball. Who should own firearms and who should carry firearms? Would you like to start with Josh?
So who should own firearms? I think anybody that is legally allowed to be in America should have access to firearms if they want them, as long as, you know, they're not a violent criminal, right? I mean, there are rules on the books on who cannot have a firearm. If we make sure that those laws are enforced, I don't think we can ignore it. Probably draw back on some of them. I think that that, and then
Who should carry firearms?
well, so I lived in a whole bunch of states that allowed, if you were able to own a firearm, you could carry that firearm And I think that that should be here in Illinois, I think that should be across the country. If you have that firearm, legally have that firearm, I think you should go carry that firearm.
Yeah.
Would you like to go next?
Sure. I agree 100% with what Josh said. I will add, again, based on my experience right now, I was working for Cook County. I work in a government building that has one of those stupid signs in the window that says you can't bring a gun onto the premises. As a retired law enforcement officer, I have to abide by that. I can carry a gun in here, I can carry a gun anywhere. I have to abide by that sign, believe it or not. I argue with my boss on that, and I say, boss, all that sign does, you see them everywhere in Chicago. You don't see them as much out here, but I said, all those signs, what that sign says is to the criminal, come here and attack me, because nobody in here has a gun to protect themselves. So all those signs do is tell the criminal, do you think a criminal is going to walk down the street and say, I'm going to commit a crime in that building? Uh-oh, I better not go in there. It has a no gun sign. I mean, that's nonsense. So I believe that anyone, to me, when you get in a bad situation, when a person walked in this door right now and started shooting, we need good people in here with weapons to protect all of us. Guns in the hands of good people will thwart the bad guys.
Jeff, would you like to go next? Who should own and who should carry?
If you're not a felon and you're an American citizen, I think anybody should be allowed to have guns as well as carry guns. I don't think anybody is against 8-hour training class. You know, if you have a concealed carry, I believe Illinois is 16 hours. So I don't think anybody is against training. Women and minorities have been buying guns the last couple of years, more so than they have ever in the past. So, like I said, as long as you're a citizen, not a felon, absolutely. Guns for everybody.
Rachel, I think you answered this in your opening remarks. Would you like to add anything?
Wow, you guys all answered it really well. Well, I would say women, because women are a little, well, I will say when I first shot, I was a little intimidated when shooting with a firearm. But once I became really comfortable and I knew what I was doing, I was actually, then I became a firearms instructor because I loved it so much. I would say women, and I know that's different than what everybody else is saying, but women, I can't stress this enough for women to have a gun at all times. There's all kinds of carry concealments that you guys can use, especially with what's going on today. I mean, you could walk down Geneva, you would think it's just amazing here, you're not going to have an issue, but you might have someone who might be following you or might come out of a dark alley around here. I'm not sure if they're already here. But you just don't know. Somebody might come up to your car. They're randomly going up to people's cars, or they're randomly tagging women's cars. And I feel that women should be armed. All women should take advantage of the Roe v. Wade, the Second Amendment. I say get in, get some classes. There's all kinds of basic classes for women.
Mike, anything to add?
A little bit. I would agree with the comments earlier. Certainly, anyone who has not been convicted of a felony in the United States is able to own a firearm based on what the Second Amendment says, keep and bear arms. I would add one thing to a little bit of what was discussed, and that is that we have to keep in mind that although it may sound like what we want it to be, that you have to be a citizen. You have to also understand that those rights don't apply to people who are just literally a citizen here. So if a person was here on a visa, or someone was visiting the country here, believe it or not, they're protected by that as well. So that's something to consider for everyone to have the ability, and I'm a firm believer in them having that ability to be able to protect and defend themselves. The next thing is who should be able to carry it. basically anyone, again, who's not a convicted felon or hasn't demonstrated that they're a danger to themselves or someone else, from the standpoint of, mentally unstable people, people who are severely addicted to controlled substances, whether it be alcohol, whether it be drugs or whatever, can be in a state of mind that puts everyone else at risk. I believe that you have the right to exercise any of your constitutional rights as long as it doesn't infringe on somebody else's. So I would also keep that as a consideration. And in regards to carrying, I agree with her comment. Everybody should carry a gun. My reason for saying that is there's only one person that's always there to protect you, and that's you. So if you're not capable or equipped to be able to do that at the time, you're going to be in trouble when that moment comes.
Our second question is another two-part question, taking a little bit different tack on it. Generally speaking, are firearms a danger to the community, a necessary tool to protect the innocent, or something else? And the follow-up to that is, does this answer change based on a rural or urban nature of the community in question? Let's start with Frank.
I think that in terms of let me start with the second part, the urban or rural. I think clearly folks who are living out in the hinterlands where, there's a saying in law enforcement, when seconds count, the police are minutes away. And that's true whether you're in the city or whatever else. If someone is coming at you with a gun, it's nice to think you can dial 911 and the police will be there. Yeah, they'll be there, but it's going to take them a few minutes to get there. So I think if you're living in an area where the sheriff's department or whoever it's going to take them a while to get there. I think those folks clearly might have more of a reason to have weapons. And I think traditionally you'll find that most of those folks, probably do. So what's the first part of the question?
Generally speaking, are firearms a danger to the community, a necessary tool to protect the innocent, or something else?
Well, I think clearly in the hands, again, it's dependent who has a weapon. A weapon in the hands of a bad person is a danger to the community. And it gets back to what Jeff said, we need to prosecute those people and keep them in jail. I can take my gun out and put it on this table, and literally it'll sit there for 50 years and not hurt anybody if nobody touches it. If nobody pulls the trigger, the gun itself, guns don't just jump up and kill people. Guns, people who pull the trigger kill people. So like anything else, a car, a gun, anything, in the hands of someone who misuses it, it could be a danger to the community.
I realize as I'm asking this question, you all more or less addressed it in the first question. So I'll just open up to the rest of the table real quick. Does anybody have anything to add on this specific topic? Should we move on to the next question?
You said urban or rural? Even in Chicago, they have, it's called, on their computers, it's called call stacks, where they're stacked calls and they're so busy that they have pending calls. So if there's another shooting, a Chicago police officer might not be there for 10, 15 minutes. So it's urban and rural. It doesn't matter where you are. Like Mr. Langston said, you are the one that's going to protect you.
Very good. Thank you. We'll move on to the third question. Now that we have a standing army in the United States, is there still a place in society for militias, as referenced in the Second Amendment, or is there another practical application of the right to keep and bear arms? Rachel, would you like to start off with that one?
Repeat that last part.
Now that the United States has a standing army, is there still a place in society for militias, as referenced in the Second Amendment, or is there another practical application for the right to keep and bear arms?
Well, there's lots of militias, and I believe in them. I know a couple myself out there in the rural area. We don't have militias. I mean, what's to say that the army doesn't turn against the citizen? So you should form militias. You should, as long as they're law-abiding, abiding by the rules. That is what I believe, and I do believe in militias. wholeheartedly, 100%, because you never know when your military personnel is gonna turn on the citizens. They're giving orders. They may not want to do it, but it's their orders to do it. So, I really believe in county.
I think definitely militias need to still be formed, and they need to be recognized by the community and also by the government, from the standpoint that the standing army is for the defense of the nation as a whole. Posse Comitatus prevents the army from being used against its citizen within the boundaries of the country itself. You have a number of reasons where the militia could come into play, and that is obviously a tyrannical government, which was referred to, and it's the primary reason why the Second Amendment was included in the Bill of Rights. The next reason was the fact that you could have an assault or an attack from a foreign government, another nation, someone attacks our country. I think we can sum that all up in one word: Ukraine. If you don't recognize the need for those peoples armed, defending themselves and their homeland, in that situation there's probably very little that any of us are going to be able to say that's going to convince you any different. So yes, there definitely is a need to have the ability for the citizens to be able to form a militia, protect themselves from a government that goes out of control, foreign invaders or attackers, and the other issues of self-defense, hunting, collecting firearms, all those other things are secondary issues that even back at the time when the Second Amendment was formed, those were given. There was no question about that. And self-defense is an inalienable right that isn't granted by the government. It's nothing more than recognized in the Bill of Rights. So we shouldn't have to look at some type of permission or whether we're able to form that militia or not as citizens of this country.
Josh, your thoughts on militias?
Yeah, as he spoke on, right, we saw on the news in Ukraine, they were handing weapons to civilians, right? We need to ensure that we can defend our own nation, right? Not only from ourselves, right? Because I feel confident in saying the majority of us here don't like our government right now, right? We need to be able to protect ourselves from the government, but not only that, we need to be able to protect ourselves from other governments. I would go a step farther in saying we shouldn't have the restrictions on the types of firearms that we have, right? There are heavier firearms that the government doesn't allow us to have, and I think that we should have those. Access to those if you can financially afford those. They are expensive. So,
These about automatic,
not necessarily just automatics, but like larger caliber weapons.
like 50 counts.
Right. I mean,
So I just said that like, we did like.
absolutely fine. But I mean, if we're going to fight, so like in Ukraine, right, the Russians have large weapons, right? And you can hand somebody an AK, but what is that AK going to do against a tank? Or I don't know what the Russians use for me. I was on strikers, so it's like a tank, but it's wheeled, so it doesn't have tracks, but it's like a tank. And your AK or your AR isn't going to do diddly squat to me and my striker. I'm going to roll through town. I'm going to annihilate your town. So we do have access to those things also that can stop equipment like that.
Right. Your thoughts on militias today?
I agree with what's been said here. I think, with my background in the FBI, law enforcement in general, the term militia sometimes has a negative connotation, because there have been certainly some instances of militia groups that were plotting and planning to do horrible things. And those folks are now doing time in prison. So I think a militia for the right purpose, to protect and defend the country, you know, if they want to go out in the woods and play warrior and call themselves a militia group, as long as they're not engaging in the violent criminal acts, which sadly some militia groups do engage in, you know, I don't have a problem. So that's my.
If it's in the Constitution, I'm for it. I believe I heard several years ago, Michigan has 50,000 militia members. The only thing I can add is we've had it good in the United States for so long. Don't think that there can't be war on our soil. I mean, it's possible. So, you know, 3/4 of our military is overseas in World War III. I think that able-bodied men, 17 to 64, I think is the militia. I may be off in the age range in the Constitution, but I think that's important. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the groups of organized citizens with firearms.
And because I can't seem to resist two-part questions, I got one more for you. I know people like to use the term mainstream media is overused, and so I'll call them old media. I think you all know how I'm referring to. So, does old media portray public safety stories fairly and accurately? And where would you recommend we go for news and education on public safety and Second Amendment issues? Let's start with Mike.
I would answer that as no, the old media does not portray that in accurate light, and hasn't for a long time. They have an agenda on their side of the issue, and they choose to promote that. And by promoting that, it dampens the ability for the public to hear what actually happens out on the street. And it's not just on Second Amendment issues; it's on a number of issues. But people that use their numerous statistics that estimate and are able to support these estimations, because not all of these incidents are reported to the police, that well over 2 million times a year, people use a firearm in some manner. Doesn't mean that they fire a shot, maybe just display. They may be able to imply that they have a weapon and be able to stop a situation to defend themselves or someone else. So you rarely hear that reported on the nightly news, so to say. As far as other sources that you're able to go to, the NRA publishes one called The Armed Citizen. There's a lot of information on there. All of the program groups have a means to be able to do that in a lot of their publications, newsletters, things of that nature. So those sources, Gun Owners of America, the Second Amendment Foundation, Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, National Association for Gun Rights, all of them have those resources available on their websites. So I urge you to go and take a look at that. But also, don't be afraid to raise that issue in a public setting. See how some of these people who are running for office respond to that. What is it that they have to say about the issue? And why? Do they acknowledge that it's not being reported? That it's not an accurate representation of what actually takes place in day-to-day life for us out in the real world? Put them to the challenge there as to how they answer that.
Rachel, your thoughts on the media?
Oh, don't get me started on media. Fake news, no. I don't trust anything from the news. I don't watch the news. I just don't get down with the news. And like you said, it's an agenda. It's agenda thing. And I mean, it's like to scare you, to give you fear, to all of the above. I want to say some of the sites that I like to go to is the Illinois Rifle Association. They also have a publication as well and a newsletter, and they get down with all the 2A laws, everything that's going down here in Illinois, coming through the pipeline from J.B. Pritzker. There's another good source. Another good source is savelife.com. So SAVE life.com. So that's another one that'll go into like different stories, details of what's happened factually, and what the law did with some of those stories and things like that. USCCA also has a publication and a newsletter for those who have concealed carry. The licenses as well, they have insurance through them. So once you become a member of them, they'll give you all those publications. I have a magazine that comes to my, every 2 months, I believe it is. And you get to read about all the new things that are happening, not just Illinois, but like across the nation. So those are some really good details there.
Jeff, what are your thoughts on the media and what do you recommend?
Read the question.
Sure, sure.
Thanks.
Does old media portray public safety stories fairly and accurately? And where would you recommend we go for news and education on public safety and Second Amendment issues?
Absolutely not. CNN is just the worst. MSNBC, it's just even Fox now. I hate to say it, they're, it's unbelievable. And then you have, those stations and then our local stations talking about COVID for 2 years. It's all it's COVID. There's more important things than COVID. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but you almost have to go to several different types of sources. You can do MSM a little bit. You can do, I hate to say it, InfoWars. Some of that stuff is true.
Yeah.
I hate to say it. Some of it's not.
Right.
But listen, even if 25% of the stuff on InfoWars is true, we're in deep doo-doo.
Yeah.
Okay. Breitbart is okay. Zero Hedge, and again, some of these websites have stuff that's not good, or there's some too far right people on there. That's fine, but some of that stuff is true. I'm trying to think. YouTube is great. It's just, you have to go to alternative sources. You have to, because you're not going to get the truth from MSM, CNN. Their ratings are in the toilet. I'm surprised they're even like on TV anymore. I think half their subscribers are at airports. Nobody's watching. So you have to use discernment, and you have to go to several different sources. And we're all smart people in this room, and I think that's you're going to form the truth from a wide variety of sources. You're going to know what's BS and what is legit.
Right, the media fair?
Absolutely not. And to answer the first part of your question, I'll go back to what I said about that block. CWB, Chicago, it'll broaden your horizons as to what's going on in reality. The second thing that I'd like to just add to that is how it affects law enforcement. I'll give a couple examples. We saw 2 cases this past year in Minnesota where the officer was kneeling on an individual's neck and he died. And the female officer who mistakenly pulled her gun instead of her taser. Were those mistakes, certainly the taser case. Well, my point is this, both of those stories were media driven. I'm all in favor of police officers being held accountable. But when a police officer makes a mistake, and those of you who are in the room who are law enforcement or ex-military know that when you're under high pressure, extremely volatile situations, that poor officer in Minnesota, the female, there's sirens, there's people screaming. We got a non-compliant subject. She accidentally reaches for her taser, and mistakenly it was her gun, and she kills the guy. Should that victim's family be compensated? Absolutely. Should that officer now be sitting in prison? Absolutely not. And that's a media-driven story where the media is demonizing the work of the police. It's almost like an extension of the defund the police movement. They are making it so unattractive to be a police officer these days. Police department, police officer, being a police officer is the only job where you can make a mistake. When a doctor makes a mistake and accidentally kills someone on the operating table or someone dies, You don't see the doctor being hauled away in handcuffs. The hospital pays out millions of dollars, liability insurance, that's fine. Leave the doctor alone. When a police officer, when I was an FBI agent, if I fired my gun at a bad guy and my gun bullet ricocheted and hit the post and struck a 60-year-old woman crossing the street and killed her, that's a mistake. Compensate the woman's family. Should I be put in jail because my bullet accidentally hit that woman? No. But because of the media, that's the environment we're living in now. Police officers are so afraid of making a mistake that the term is called going fetal, where they only, at least in big cities now, they're only responding to calls. That's a tragedy for all of us because good police work means proactive police work. Proactive police work, you're going to make mistakes, but honest mistakes should not destroy an officer's career and his life because he makes an honest mistake. And the media is driving that narrative all the time. And it's no wonder now no one wants to be a police officer anymore, which is a real tragedy for us.
Josh, your thoughts on me?
The media, I would say, if it's on broadcast television, go somewhere else. Don't go to any of them. And then for myself, for a lot of two-way stuff, where I get my information is at the gun store, right? A lot of the people that are working there know stuff, so I like to watch a lot of people on YouTube. I can't remember that long, but half the time, the girls or guys working at the shop know what I'm going to watch on my videos 2 or 3 days later before. So, I mean, I know for myself, I spend more time in the range than a lot of people do. But, if you frequently go to the range, which you should be if you are exercising courage, because you should be practicing with your firearm, make friends with the people at the shops, and they're going to tell you about new laws that are coming up, and things that are coming up before you can hear about it anywhere else.
We're going to move to the portion of our evening where we take questions from the audience. So microphone's not working, so let's just see a show of hands and we'll just start with Jim.
Yeah, you mentioned Kim Fox and with some of the other prosecutors and DAs in the big markets. And I hear the name George Soros all over the place. But I don't know a whole lot. I'm just wondering if any of you can shed any light on what's going on or anything that could give us hope that somehow, some way, this person's going to be stopped from doing what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I can only say that it's documented that George Soros supported all those DAs or state's attorneys that you mentioned, including Kim Fox. I know Kim Fox personally. She's a nice person. I mean, if she was in here right now, she's very personable, very cordial. But she is under, and all her counterparts who were funded by George Soros, they are under marching orders to empty the jails, decriminalize things that should be not decriminalized, and demonize the police. That is their mission. And Kim Fox wouldn't put it quite that way, but there's no other way to explain it. So I think in San Francisco and Los Angeles, there's going to be successful recalls. So to answer your question, that's the only way I know for him to be stopped is for the people to say enough is enough. We're not going to put up with prosecutors who are really masquerading as defense attorneys.
Does that include Jamie Wilson?
Oh,
So
no, I think DuPage and Kane are okay. I don't know.
So I don't know if Monster got Soros money. However, she is towing the Democrat line along with my boss, Ron Hayne. They're pushing pre-arrest diversion programs where if you get charged with certain felonies, I FOIA'd them last week, the state's attorney, and they just said property crime felonies. And I replied back, can you be more specific? I think they're implying burglary, car burglary and burglary, which is a property crime, but they're still a victim. So the pre-arrest diversion program is, they're not arrested, they go to this, it's like a social program. They're not on a ankle bracelet, they get to stay at home, and I believe there's some type of drug testing maybe, or there's meetings or something, but when they're not doing the meetings or the drug testing, how do we know they're not committing more crimes? And I asked a sergeant that I know at my office this, and he shrugged his shoulders, because they are going to commit more crimes with the pre-arrest diversion program. Also, no cash bail goes into effect January 1 of 23, so that's coming up in less than a year. Crime is going to increase. It's a fact. You can't really debate that. It's not arguable. In New York, 2 years ago, no cash bail went into effect, and crime increased like 17% overall. But like carjackings were like 30% increase. Assault was increased. Burglary was increased in New York City. I know King County is not as dangerous as New York City, but the point is that crime is going to increase. Also, Jamie Mosser, I know detectives all over the county, they're telling me, and I've experienced this myself, it's like pulling teeth to get felony charges from Mosser in King County. The judges are releasing offenders with no bail or low bail. I made a burglary arrest last year. The guy, it was like 2 in the morning, 7:30 a.m. No bail, go home.
How do we get beyond that?
The judges and the state's attorney and my boss are towing the Democrat line, and it's got to stop.
It's being tied to federal dollars. Federal money is finding its way into the state's attorney's office, and they are having to cave to the pressure with the federal government. So that the pretrial diversion program is federal money. It's coming in, and they're being tied to it. And so there's a woman in charge of the program. I'll talk to you afterward. And she's trying to launch her political career. And it's federal dollars. It's what's coming in. We have to get ourselves untied from the federal and state money at the local level. That's the problem. It's been a problem for 50 years.
So
So I don't mean to interrupt, but
No,
I've got
that's
buddy.
information I didn't know. I didn't know what's.
So,
Now, are you talking pre-trial or are you talking pre-diversion? Because it's two.
pre-arrest program. I'm sorry, I
Okay,
misspoke.
'cause
Pre-arrest, the pre-arrest program. It's a social program.
There is no
Tied
arrest.
to federal money.
So the pre-arrest diversion, there is no charges.
Yeah.
How do you get into custody?
Well,
How do you get untied from the federal money? Ballot box? What's?
Oh, well, that's honestly, that's a great question.
So to
That's a
answer
great
your
question.
question,
Militias? Hey.
what was your question one more time?
How do you get them in custody if they're not arrested?
So if they're caught, if they burglarize a car and we catch them at night, or they burglarize, I think, I asked again, like, what specific crimes, or if they're selling drugs, intend to distribute. They get taken into custody, but there's no charges. So when I say arrest, I mean charge with the crime, county jail, court. The pre-arrest diversion gets rid of county jail and court, is my understanding.
So we'll get our.
Ask your county board member.
So they may go to jail for the night, maybe, but I mean, the actual charges and the court is my understanding is wiped away if they complete the pre-arrest diversion program.
But that's the question. Ask how many people have completed that pre-arrest diversion program. My guess is it's very low.
But even if they do get arrested, okay, then they go to bond court. And there's still let go, maybe.
But in Cook County, the problem in Cook County, and there's a case where just last week, someone was arrested for a fairly serious charge, gun charge. The defense attorney said, Your Honor, we're ready to accept a $50,000 bond. So the judge said, okay, prosecutor, what do you recommend? Prosecutor, works for Kim Fox, said $5,000. The judge said, ma'am, I think you made a mistake. The defense expects 50. You're asking for 5. And she goes, that's correct. The judge said, I have to set it at 5. So, I mean, there you have a case, and that's not unusual, where, prosecutors now are bending over backwards to get people back out on the street, which is just really.
So what end? What
They believe it goes, this isn't being recorded, so I think it has to do with the notion that Cook County Jail is no mystery. It's like 97% minority. There's some Hispanics. It's almost all African American. So the African American community, from Ms. Preckwinkle, Kim Fox on down, all believe that if you got 95% of the jail is African American, our system must be racist. It's a racist system. And so they're trying to correct a perceived problem that really doesn't exist. I mean, 95% of the violent crime in Chicago was committed by minorities. I mean, that's just a fact.
I don't believe that with black.
Well, no, and that's the sad part. These people who are released, they don't come to Geneva. They go back to their own community and prey upon these same people, and it's a never-ending cycle.
Then how do people
Can I-
looking
what-
get an office?
So let me get 60 seconds. So this goes deeper. It's all deeper than what we're talking about. You're spending $8 trillion on wars in the Middle East. There's 30 million illegal aliens in the country the last 40 years. And there's costs associated with those things. Illegal aliens have probably cost the United States several $1 trillion over those 4 decades. So when you're spending, $15 trillion on wars and illegal aliens, there's no money. Then you have, I hate to say it, illegal aliens they're not just taking bad jobs, they're taking good jobs. They're taking good factory jobs. They're taking construction jobs. I mean, not so much electricians, but carpentry, plumbing, masonry, brickwork.
Yeah.
These are jobs that Americans have always done and still do. So when someone says, oh, they do the jobs that Americans don't do, they're lying to you, okay? Reference the black community in the city. The Democrats in power don't want those people. I hate to say that, but they don't want them to live the American dream. It seems like they want to keep them there. I don't know. It's decade after decade after decade, nothing has changed. So how can they get jobs if you've got 20 million illegal aliens taking jobs? Good jobs that Americans, white and black, and legal Hispanics have always done. So it's deeper than crime, and I think the United States government, they know what they're doing. Our government there's Marxists in our government, and they know what they're doing. Okay? So they don't want to fix this. So everybody keeps asking to what end? They don't want to fix it. The United States government does not want to fix it. Do you understand that? Does everybody understand that?
Yeah.
Okay, and it's not.
Part of the plan. It's all part of
So-
the
Jobs.
What's so-
I would
yeah.
say, so for myself, you said the magic word, right, Marxist, right? The communists have been attacking our country for 100 years. The communists have been attacking our country for 100 years. And they're not just doing it a little bit by little bit anymore, right? They're pushing 100 miles a day. The communists are here, they're at the gates, they're knocking it down. They want everybody in America to be reliant on them. And we need to give people in office that are being pushed back against them.
I think one of the original question in regard to George Soros is, he's not the only person that's behind this. There are a number of people worldwide who have a socialist agenda, and they are going to focus on the United States. As he just pointed out, this is nothing new. This has been happening for decades. The problem is that many of us, and we're all responsible for this, have sat on our hands and not done anything until we got to a critical moment in time where we're at right now. How many people have actually paid any attention to what the government actually does on a daily basis? Whether it's creating laws, enforcing regulations, the persuasion that they use through obviously the major media to influence how the country feels about a particular issue. The cancel culture, this systemic racism issue that nobody can seem to define, but whatever it is, you're guilty of. We now have turned on to the point of, well, you should report the person who lives next door because they done something that we don't agree with. So you need to tell that to the government officials or the police or whatever. We need to get ourselves educated to understand who these people are and that this agenda is something that they believe in just as strongly as I'm sure most of you here tonight believe in the Second Amendment. They are going to push this. They're pushing it on the kids in the schools. They're invoking it on people in their workplace. All those things have been demonstrated. Just look at through this whole COVID response. You know, wait, now you need a card to be able to go in a restaurant?
We're not doing that either.
Yeah. Well, but the reality is we've already done it.
Yeah.
We can easily say that, well, I'm not going to do this. But I'll tell you what, one of us is not going to stop the tidal wave. That's the whole point. We need to do the same thing that the people that are driving this are doing. They're mounting people out in the streets, they rioted, they burned, they attacked, they killed, they done everything with no penalty. Why are we, as the people that are supportive of what our laws are, the Constitution, standing by and allowing that to happen?
I have
One last comment on this topic.
I have a Second Amendment. It's a comment, but I want a response.
Okay.
So we talked earlier about who has the right to carry a firearm. We talked about felons don't have that right. At one point, there was a response about mental health, some of the challenges there. I challenge that issue because it's a slippery slope. All right. So there are cases popping up, or at least have, where parents who refuse to get their children vaccinated were, in some instances, deemed unfit to be parents. Okay. So my question is, some of the things that I'm doing with my kids, I have every intent of being charged as someone who has a mental health issue. Number one, I ripped them out of schools because the anti-American sentiment that's in our public schools. So how do we navigate that with a government who's trying to go to a one-payer healthcare system? How do we navigate that in regards to who can carry a firearm if certain people are deemed mentally unfit? Who gets to declare that?
I think that's one of the key points again is the core of that issue is what's driving this agenda. It's to change the culture of the country. And if they can convince you that, you know what, because you don't want your kid to have to wear a mask in school, or you don't want them to be exposed to certain things in the curriculum at the school, that if you speak up, well, you're the deranged one. We as the decent people need to stand up and say, no, that's not how it is. We can't stand by and watch this happen, and it's happened across the country, not in one specific area. It's happening all over the place. The federal government right now, the majority of the agencies within the federal government do not seem to work for the will of the people.
No.
This is supposed to be our government. Our government. We have a responsibility to keep it in check and to monitor what it does. But it seems, but we have to take the step to make them take notice of that. We don't see our side out there, and I'm talking about protest. We can call it peaceful protest, whatever you want to term it as. But the point is, we're never going to redress those grievances if nobody speaks up. And that's, we are the silent majority in this situation, standing by and watching this happen. And then, just like you mentioned about taking your kids out of the school, that's a good move for you as an individual. I commend you for that. But
My wife's not here to talk about the homeschooling.
No, Matt is at all the Geneva School Board meetings and speaking up too. So there are people,
sure.
and we were all at the bridge yesterday. So it needs to be more.
Can I give you an example of how this affects locally? Okay, so at a school board meeting about 3 months ago, there is a school board member in charge of legislative issues. So she keeps track of state legislative issues and presents them to the rest of the school board members in a public setting. One of the resolutions was the Illinois school board, there's actually a state school board, wanted local school boards to take a poll, to basically a straw poll of would you vote for this issue? One of those issues was a gun rights issue. It had to do specifically with, do rural schools have the right to have armed citizens in their classrooms because of the response issue with police, right? It had to do with the school shootings. And Geneva School Board is voting on this. Do they support that legislation? And we all voted, and we all heard them vote. You know, they didn't overwhelmingly, but there was 3 or 4 that said no. We don't want. We may not have that right, or we don't necessarily think we need that in Geneva, but we're also not going to impede on somebody else's right to have that. Well, they tried to overrule it at this school board meeting. And if a bunch of us parents sitting in the crowd didn't speak up and say, hey, wait a minute, you guys are trying to change your votes to how to give feedback to the State Board of Education, they would have changed their vote and it would have gone back up that Geneva School Board supports across the board no guns in schools no matter what. And I thought, how can we do that? How is a Geneva School Board having an effect on Yorkville schools or someplace out on the Iowa border who decides they want to, or Illinois border with Iowa, that they need to carry guns in schools? It blows my mind as to how they think.
I'll add that it's not only, I know I'm stepping out of the moderator role here for a minute. It's not only the education system, but it's also the medical system, because I know from firsthand experience that they're going lower, younger and younger, asking children, you have guns in the house, how do you feel about it?
That's what this, some of it was mandatory reporting.
Collection of information.
Or gun storage. Gun storage.
So what right does a doctor or a nurse have to ask if they kill?
That comes from the federal level.
Well, they'll never ask my kids that.
So, yeah, you know, so this is coming back to what I said about Marxism. They're getting us with the schools and the medical and the colleges and the Black Lives Matter. The organization is Marxist, so it's all coming back to the same thing.
However, that's probably the best thing that came out of COVID, is the fact that we're aware.
Woken a lot of people up. That's true. That's true. So let me expand on that. So you need to get your school boards, get those people out of there, and get Republicans in there. Enough is enough. You know?
I want to get Dina, real quick though, any thoughts from other panel members on the slippery slope issue?
Mainly just the mental health. If we
I'm
have
against red flag laws.
okay,
I'm against red flag laws. Listen, if a guy has so many contacts with the sheriff's office and he's like legitimately insane, okay.
Right.
But I mean, the slippery slope, no, because an ex-wife said that, you know, my ex-husband is violent and I don't want him having guns, or a neighbor, absolutely not. Red flag laws, not doing it, not doing it.
I think you just outlined what needs to be done. You demonstrated that by being there and speaking up, you were able to change the course of what was going to happen. That's exactly my point. We need to get involved in these situations and be able to let them know that there are people that are paying attention and you have a voice in what's taking place. Just like
They're quitting.
right, and that is one of the good things that did come out of COVID, is people are starting to realize what's actually happening and stepping in to take steps like you did. And also in regards to the red flag law, I absolutely oppose that. But the issue in the red flag law is not about what we'll call mental health issues. That's actually about controlling people. There is no requirement of any substantiated act
Right, there's no due
or
process.
opinion. Exactly. So it's not about mental health. This is about, well, we want to be able to have an ability on paper in a law to say, we can come in and take your guns because we just don't like you. That's what that's about. So as far as the mental health aspect, we define what that comes out to be as the people. If it's someone who is demonstrated, and like I said before, some propensity for violence in a situation that is clearly and medically substantiated, those are the people that you have to be able to deal with not being harmed under those those circumstances. But no, absolutely not. The red flag situation, if that can't be legally and medically supported as to the justification of that, absolutely not. And that is not, we call it red flag now, but any of us who've been in law enforcement, this is nothing new. They've been able to do this for a long time.
There's gonna be some. My problem with that, and I agree with you 100%. I'm glad you're behind that as a citizen of Kane County, because as a concealed carry instructor, I have to talk about this new law all the time in my classes, and this law is going to be abused.
The red flag law.
Sure. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Ron was gonna, a couple years ago, he was on the news, he was gonna start doing it, he immediately got pushback, so he was gonna have 3 deputies go to a house, have a sergeant and a deputy at the door, knocking the door, and a deputy at the car with a rifle, and we're all like, I'm not going and taking people's guns away. You lost your mind, a patrol deputy and a sergeant? We're not doing it. And so everybody's like, we're not doing it. So when I say 80 to 90% of police are pro-gun, they are. And I'm not saying that a legitimately crazy person should have guns.
Right.
But you're not sending patrol deputies with soft body armor to take someone's guns. You send a SWAT team if you need.
But they send out letters.
Like the shooter.
saying they're gonna do that.
Like the shooter at the Pratt incident in Aurora back in 2019. That guy shouldn't have had guns. The Pratt shooting?
Yeah.
You know, so the state police sent a letter, you know, for legitimate people. And the numbers are so low, I don't even know what they are. If there's, you know, 3, 4, 5 million gun owners in the state, I'm not too sure what it is. But the percentage of people that actually need to get their guns taken away is so low. You know what I mean? So.
I know Dean's been trying to get a question.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Sorry,
No,
go ahead.
it's okay.
No, we're gonna do one more question. Jeff has to work tonight, so we're trying to respect his time.
You know what, I can stay till 8:30. I'm liking this conversation.
You like it?
I'll stay
That's
on.
fun.
I'll have to drive a little bit faster.
All right. Do you have another question?
I was just gonna say back to what we were talking about earlier. So I started a group in my neighborhood because we had Antifa right down the street, BLM housing Antifa. So right at the beginning of COVID, I was like, okay, shit hits the fan. What are we gonna do? Blah, blah, blah. I went around, I started this group. And we had a lot of tyranny happening with their Democratic mayor, giving a neighbor of mine a whole lot of grief, and his family, and his wife is a teacher, and blah, blah, he's a Marine. And so our group went into the city council, and let me tell you what, if you don't think you can't make change, you can make change. You just gotta show up, and you gotta be there, and you gotta get involved. Because we told the whole place, you know, you're forgetting, you people work for us. We own everything in here. We paid for everything in here that you're using, blah, blah, blah. But it was a big fight almost every other week when we would go to city council. They hated it when we walked through the door. So we voted out this Democratic mayor, got him out, got the Republican mayor in, and things are great in our town now.
What city was it? I'm sorry.
Pardon?
What city?
Plano.
Oh, Plano, okay.
Yeah, so that's how I ended up, I got invited to the Stamp Act Pact group meeting, and I met these 2 beautiful souls right here. And he's part of it too. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say, and back to Alex Jones, yeah, he's a little rough around the edges, but I've been listening to him for 28 years. And I know most of everything that's happening usually before it happens. Somehow he knows. And even though he's a little rough around the edges, he's been trying to tell people this for 28 years. My mom told me when I was a young girl what was going to happen, and she was spot on. So, but this is what they want. They want to take down America. They want everybody out of the rural areas. They're building up the tall, you know, apartment buildings. They want to cram everybody into the cities. They want everybody on the government, you know, so that the government control every single thing you do and say. Yeah. That's what they're trying to do.
Thank you. Sir, what are you guys? Did you have your hand up a minute ago? Okay, I'm sorry. I saw a hand up.
Yeah, I'd like to, unconstitutional FOID card. And you made a comment about police going to houses to, take weapons, firearms from citizens. The new FOID card will no longer have an expiration date. as they're being reissued. Want some commentary about some of the background thought behind that. There was an editorial opinion piece in the Gun Safe Life magazine newsletter where some thought went behind there that essentially we're going to have more lapsed void cards, and then there'll be police sent to do gun confiscations across the state.
So you said the Floyd card, there's not gonna be an expiration date? Right, yeah.
So the card's not gonna have it, but if you log in online, it'll show your expiration date. The thinking behind it is you're gonna look at your card and you're like, oh, it doesn't expire. And then it's going to still expire. You still need to go and renew it, but you're not, if you just look at your card, you're not gonna know when you need to renew it.
Then you're gonna get a letter.
And they take forever to get you a point card.
So-
Right, the law says they have 30 days to get it to you, and they don't.
I know neighbors that it took them 3, 4, 5, 6 months to get their Floyd card when they hadn't had a Floyd card
15
before.
months, 14 months.
I renewed mine 2 years ago. I was a 13-year deputy at the time. It took me 9 months to get it. I had to call. I had to call the state ISP guy. Say, hey, it's sitting on a pile.
Yeah.
They got these applications just sitting there.
62,500.
So they're violating your rights. They're violating our rights by not giving the Floyd card. And like I said, that judge down south, I forget what county it was, he tossed the case and said that the Floyd card is unconstitutional.
How long before they expire?
It's 10 years now. I think they just changed the concealed carry to 5.
They do the same thing with concealed carry. They don't renew those sometimes.
So they
I
should-
waited a year for that.
We need to make a push in Illinois to get rid of it. I agree.
This is where it came
Not a foul. I think Illinois is one of only 2 or 3 other states that has some type of license to have a gun. The Constitution doesn't say the right to bear arms with a Floyd card. It says the right to bear arms. Okay, so
Darren Bailey's all for it. Only
Do
Darren
you know
Bailey's
if there's
all
a
for it.
constitutional theory is gonna be addressed in the state, and a lot more states are gonna, I think there was 3 or 4 this year that.
I haven't heard anything at the state level.
As long as the Democrats have a super majority, as long as they have a majority in our state, we're not gonna get a constitutional.
Right,
We're not
right.
even get anything with a void out of committee as long as the Democrats have a majority.
Well, 60% of the counties in Illinois are Second Amendment sanctuaries. I pay pretty close attention to that. It's like 60, 65%, maybe a little bit more. So if the sheriffs aren't going to enforce all these laws, then you know what? That's why it's important to have good sheriffs. Okay, because what is the state going to do? Is go around and send troopers to people's homes that have expired voting cards? It's crazy. So just keep that in mind when you
So the reason I brought it up was just because I'm too, like a follow-up is, being militia. At what point then would it be the Illinois National Guard, or something, they elevate it to the next level?
That is an authorized militia in the state. That's actually what the National Guard is identified as legally on paper. They are considered a state militia.
but it's funded through the feds.
I actually have a question in regards to that. I mean, there's limitations. I mean, the National Guard and the U.S. military cannot be used for unlawful orders. I mean, so there comes a certain point where, I mean, even if they try to up the national or activate the National Guard to do things within the state, they still have to abide by the law. I mean, they're not above the law.
Unless martial law is enacted, because
No, that's correct.
there's some issue. I mean, so I don't know if anybody's been paying attention, but now with the war, and the government's been talking about this for 10 years, I've been paying pretty close attention to it, but the last year or so, even under Trump, the DHS is talking about like cyber attacks. Does anybody know anything about that? Cyber attacks and EMPs? Yes. Electromagnetic pulse.
Yes.
So why is, and you may know, because you work for the federal government, you may know more about this than I do, but why is the government, they're warning us about cyber warfare. So what do you think is going to happen when if the banks are closed, you can't get your cash, and, you know, God forbid the electric grid in Chicago gets hacked, shut down, or hacked, or cyber attacked, or New York. I mean, so they could enact martial law in that circumstance. And my understanding is if martial law is enacted, rights, they're gonna probably try to kick in your door and take your gun.
Hurricane Katrina. was
Right, they
exactly
did.
that.
There's video of them
In
doing that.
Katrina. So never say never.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So that's why, Melissa's are important.
What happens to your role in martial law?
I don't know, it hasn't
Okay.
happened yet.
I'm
So
curious.
the police,
Is that,
I mean, it's unprecedented.
yeah,
It really. I mean, Katrina, happened to Katrina. So it wasn't martial law, but it was,
2 weeks to flatten the curve is unprecedented too.
yeah, 15 days, 2 weeks to flatten the curve turned into 642 days or something.
It becomes a responsibility on the individual officers themselves. It's, you don't have to obey an unlawful order. There's gonna be laws that are gonna be passed through the judicial process that may in fact be unconstitutional. And there's a process that takes place, it's happening with the FOID card right now. It's in the process to be decided upon by the court as to whether this is justified constitutionally or not. And not just in a district court, but actually going through the state as well as at the federal level. So that issue is going to get addressed at some point. But as we stand here right now, if your FOID card is run every single day, everybody's FOID card is run every single day. They know whether your card's valid today. They know whether it's valid tomorrow, the next day. Doesn't matter whether you went there to buy a gun or look at ammunition or whatever the case is. These things are already happening. And that's the whole point about, we have to, having exchanges like this where people are able to get this kind of information are a great thing. But we need to grow this process much more, and we need to get people involved to take action like you yourself done. That was a good example of what individuals can do. You decided that at this point, yeah, I pay taxes, I fund those schools and everything, but you know what? My most valuable asset sitting here is not going there and being corrupted. So you took action to address that. We have to think along those lines. This is an assault on our country, our nation, our way of life, our culture.
And when I said unprecedented, I'm not gonna follow unconstitutional orders either. I didn't mean that. I meant,
Sure.
when elected, I've got 90 deputies, 95 deputies, and 80 or 90 corrections deputies that could be put on the street in some type of event like that. We're not taking people's guns. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna ask your help.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm gonna ask your help. If it comes down to that, I mean, there's some crazy events. I'll definitely tell you.
You've been trying really hard to get a question in here. No.
Sorry.
Yes, please.
So I just, I want to preface this by saying, we put the whole fraudulent election and all the corruption aside and everything. For many years, I've known many Democrats, and a lot of them are union, and they don't really have any idea what they're voting for other than what the union tells them to do. They don't vote. Every time they vote party, they don't vote policy, and that's why I feel like we're a lot of the reason why we're where we're at today. So I would like to hear some feedback as to how we can get them to stop voting for the party and realize the damage they're doing to this country.
I'll throw an answer to that. This one might not fly well in here, but there's been a lot of commentary about Republican, Democrat, and all those issues. I think you'd be surprised if you really took a look at, for example, the red flag law issue. There were a number of Republicans, well-known Republicans, who openly endorsed that.
Yeah.
President Trump openly endorsed that. Now, a lot of people may think, well, how could he do this? He was supported by the NRA and that. You have to pay close attention. Just because there's an R or a D behind your name doesn't, in and of itself, make you good or bad for the judicial process or the legislative process. And so you have to pay attention as to what's actually taking place. place, who's involved in what they're supporting and promoting out there. I think if we don't get people to take an interest in their government as it's operating right now, as much as they do some other probably less important thing that comes across the screen on their phone, we're gonna be facing much bigger issues real soon
Well, it's just.
on all fronts of our life.
Right, but the way I look at the unions is because of all the funding that they get and all the funding that they give to specific candidates for their specific agenda. Understanding that I know that's politics and that's how it works, but I mean, it seems like it's always for the same issues that takes us further and further away from where we need to be as a country.
Most unions in the trades, most of the workers are conservative. In my experience, the electricians, the plumbers, and the American plumbers, and the carpenters, they're conservative, and they probably vote conservative because they're gun owners and they're, fiscally responsible, and they don't like the open borders and all that stuff.
Well, see, in my experience is they talk conservative, but they vote Democrat because of the union. That's what the union, well, that's where I get my money from.
Do you want to speak to that, Frank?
Yeah, I was gonna.
Talking about the blue collar.
No, the unions and the
males.
pensions and how people vote.
You got a perspective from a little bit unique to this, Frank, and you talked
And your
about
dad
sort
was
of
a union.
You framed the problem earlier in your response, maybe, what can we do about it?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm speaking from a Cook County perspective where, you're really fighting an uphill battle. Because people are gonna vote for their self-interest. And when you have one party promising lollipops and roses, and the other party promoting self-reliance and hard work, and most people are gonna, not people in this room, but the majority of people are gonna fall down on the side of what's in it for me? What party is gonna give me freebies? And right now, the Democrats are doing a really good job of promising freebies. And that plays into, I don't want to denigrate anyone, but it plays into the class of our society that isn't at our level. That and the other thing tied into this that I think is really depressing, and I'm really concerned about this is, our universities are just brainwashing our next generation. That's what's scary where the universities are pumping out thousands and thousands of people who have bought into this mindset. And that to me is, I mean, obviously there are some universities that haven't been totally corrupted, but by and large, when you look at the cancel culture, God forbid anyone like us would be asked to speak at a college event, they wouldn't let us. That the students would revolt and they would keep us from speaking.
That's so scary.
It is. I mean, talk about, violating, our free speech. I mean, universities, and I'm talking about from the presidents on down, they don't want to hear people like us. They don't want to hear our views. I remember when Ben Shapiro tried to speak at DePaul. I mean, it was almost a riot. I mean, it's sad that people of our mindset are being silenced. That to me is the scariest part of what we're seeing.
Well, Frank, what's the term? Isn't it like educated enough to think, but not to question?
Exactly.
Not question or not.
And what's sad is our college students, for the most part, they come out of high school, they're like sponges. They just absorb. They don't know. They don't have our wisdom. That's what's scary.
I feel like I want to bring a dose of optimism to the crowd right now.
Yeah, that's right.
I've been a couple stories about school board meetings. I'm a thorn in the side of P300 up here. And what's going on in this room right now is unreplicated. And the admonition to be involved and to speak like we're speaking tonight is happening. So I just want to remind people of that. And the other thing I just want to remind folks of is that global Marxism is atheism. And so, and for those of you who are spiritually minded, there is a battle going on right now. I encourage you to be on your knees, and I tell you, it's an exciting time to be alive. And I want to bring some optimism to the crowd.
I just want to say, not to put a damper on that, but my son's 35 years old, and, you know, I set the foundation, the Christian foundation for him. He's a mama's boy, I was a single mom, blah, blah, blah. These schools indoctrinated him and my stepmother so bad. They started coming home, and they started noticing big changes, and they were treating us like crap. And we ended up kicking him out, but it was pretty sad because he's on all these atheist websites now. He still treats me like crap. I hear from him maybe 3 times a year. And yeah, they really did a job on both of our kids. So it's a real thing. And there's no change in it. I mean, he won't go vote. You know, like Jeremiah, why don't you go vote? Why should I vote? Now, anyway, I'll look at what happened. But, you know, I was saying, I tried before all that. Getting to go vote, you want to vote.
I want to go back to the optimism side. I have a 21-year-old, and he's a third-year college student. All of these things that have occurred, especially the gas prices, we talk about the self-interest. You got a 21-year-old who has a car, drives. He's realizing it now. He's paying more attention, and instead of like talking directly to him, I have learned to step back and talk about his checkbook and the interest rates and the credit rating and what, you know, the gas prices and all that. And he's getting it. He's getting it. And when he has his buddies over for football Sunday, because I like to have them all over, and I will cook every Sunday for them, bring them in. I listen to them, and they're getting it. They're turning around. I can see them gradually changing conversation throughout the football season.
That's good.
Great.
So,
Thank you for
little
that.
bit here and there.
Thank you for that.
Too political.
Thank you for that. No, I love the dialogue, and I think we've had some really good discussions here tonight. We're at 10 after the hour. I want to give our panelists an opportunity. You guys have heard a lot of feedback. You've provided a lot for us to think about tonight, but I want to give you each 3 minutes each to go through, and what is it that you want us to take away from tonight? Let's start with Jeff.
Like I said, the sheriff's really important. I'm running for sheriff in Kane County. My boss is towing the line, towing the Democrat line, pushing the pre-arrest diversion. He kneeled for Black Lives Matter. No one is saying that police don't make, police don't make mistakes. No one is saying that they don't make mistakes. We know that police make mistakes. But we're human, we try to do good, we try to do what's right, but I'm not kneeling for a Marxist organization. The leaders of BLM have said as such that they're Marxists. I'm going to be fiscally responsible as sheriff. I'm not going to make anti-gun statements like my boss did. I'm pro-Constitution, especially the Second Amendment and the First Amendment. Someone mentioned the issue with the schools recently. People were getting kicked out of the schools in Geneva and St. Charles, I think, over this last year. Referenced the mask issue and some other issues. If that happens again and I'm in office, you call the deputies, because what's going to happen is the Geneva police and the St. Charles police, and wherever you're at, whatever town, they're going to do what their boss says, the chief. And the chief's boss is the mayor, and usually the mayors are Democrats. You see? So do what the police say initially, but you call me I will personally show up with 10 deputies or 5 deputies, whatever it is. You're gonna go in there, you're gonna speak.
Because you have jurisdiction.
The whole county, the whole county. I will override a Geneva patrolman, I will override a Geneva chief. And you're gonna be heard, okay? You taxpayers pay for those bricks in that school and those salaries and those chairs. I pay $10,000 in property tax every year. I'm sure everybody else does. We pay, we're gonna be heard, we're not gonna be kicked out because we're not wearing a mask. I mean, the stinking box, message on the box of masks says it doesn't even work. Okay, so First Amendment is really important. I think the Second Amendment is more important than the first, because without the second, you don't really have the first.
Right.
So those two amendments are really important. So keep that in mind. Just never forget and tell your friends. There's a lot of moderates in Kane County. There's like 100,000 moderates. There's 100,000 Democrats. They say there's like 85,000 Republicans. So if we can get the moderates to go to the right side, the Republican side, the conservative side this time, they're going to see what's going on nationally. I think we can win. So just never forget that the sheriff's office and a sheriff is probably the most important elected official, in my opinion, that there is. And thank you so much for your time.
Let's go Rachel next.
I'm gonna end it with this and saying, just like with any war, they're strategically planning behind closed doors, we're asleep. We need to be doing the same thing. If we are not preparing, just like they are, they're 3 steps ahead. We need to be 4, 6 steps ahead. We need to know, how, strategically what they're doing. We also need to be proactive. We need to be involved at all levels of government. Whether you write letters, emails, you get together and you talk about who's going to go to whose office, you make a presence and you bring people with you. And that's how you're going to make change. If you don't do that, they're going to write all over us. Gotta build it, gotta keep building, keep bringing people to meetings, getting yourselves involved. If you don't get involved, it's a lost cause at that point. I mean, and I have to say that a lot of the places that I have been, and I'm not to pick on the men, I have seen more women take a stand than men. Where are our men? And I have no offense to the men on this panel or out here. But the way my pastor said, it is the man's responsibility to carry the firearms, to take care of their family, to provide, etc. He said it's not a woman's job to do that. But we are doing that. We are arming ourselves. We need our men to step up. So if you guys can talk to your male friends, bring them here to meetings. I mean, there's meetings all over the place. Bring them to a meeting, get them involved at some point. That's where I want to end with my thought process. I want to see more men involved.
Frank, closing remarks, please.
Yeah, I just want to go back to something I touched on. Jeff mentioned it. My big concern, President Biden at the State of the Union, emphatically said, I don't support defund the police. Well, guess what? It's too late. That movement has already been successful in demonizing the police. Things we've been talking about with some of these cases where police officers who make mistakes that we all make are having their lives destroyed and being thrown in jail. I know nobody likes statistics, but I'll throw out a couple. The month of January of this year, just a couple months ago, 95 Chicago police officers left the force. Many of them were not even retirement age. They're lateraling over to Oak Park, Evanston, and those departments love to take experienced Chicago police officers. There are approximately 1,200 Chicago police officers right now, and these are mostly seasoned veterans who can retire, but they love the job. They love being police officers, but they have not gotten vaccinated. Those of you know, Mayor Lightfoot just did a victory dance because she won her grievance forcing these officers to get vaccinated. They're gonna walk because they can collect their pensions. So you're gonna have up to 1,200 Chicago police officers walk off the job. Or retire, they walk away from their job at full pension. They're ready to go now, but they want to be police officers. They don't want to get vaccinated. The Chicago Police Academy over on Jackson and Racine, they can't, they're going full board. They cannot keep up with the attrition. And the problem is, in any department, you can hire police officers. People want the job, but are they qualified? Can they pass the psychological? Are they the kind of people we want walking around with guns? And sadly, what the defund the police movement has done, they've demonized the job so much that good people are no longer considering law enforcement as a career, which is sad, because we need good police officers. We need people protecting us who are passionate about the job. And that's what bothers me, is that this whole movement to defund the police, they didn't get it through the front door, but they're doing it through the back door by demonizing police so much that the police are we need good leaders like Jeff, but sadly too many police chiefs have bought into this mentality, and they attack their own officers.
And how many policemen have gotten shot?
Exactly.
I mean,
When a police officer is
that's
afraid to use his gun because he's afraid of being sued, you end up with dead police officers. And that's the sad reality.
They're lowering hiring standards now because of it's hard to get police. So you got ex-gang members and cops. I mean, you can be a police officer with an arrest from years ago, like a minor offense, sure. But I mean, we're talking arrests, DUIs, thefts, and all this stuff. And I'm not saying tatted up is bad, but I mean, ex-gang members, so they're lowering standards for police. That's that opens up the door for corruption. So it's not good. It's all right. Let me cut it. Applause for Frank.
I would just, try and take it back a little bit for a moment to the Second Amendment issue. That is, we need to educate our kids. We need to, maybe in some cases even educate ourselves. The Second Amendment doesn't come from the Constitution. It's simply recognized there in the Bill of Rights. It's an inalienable right that was acknowledged by the framers as a given. There was no question about that. We need to continue to foster that and make a stronger effort at that, whether it's belonging to a national organization, any one of the gun organizations I mentioned earlier, at a local level, organizations such as this. There even are chapters in regards to Gun Saves Lives. There's a good one here in Illinois. They have chapters all throughout the state. You can get involved in those things. We also have to be diligent in watching what is done by our state legislature, what they're doing with these laws when they're trying to move on issues that deal with firearms and Second Amendment issues. We've got to take action on it. Whether it's phone calls, whether it's letters, make a visit to their office. You have to. We have to realize how important this is and actually get involved. Spent too much time in the past of kind of sitting and watching things go by that has gotten us to the point we're at now. And just to touch on one of the other issues, another thing that I think came out of the COVID situation, and that is people today would look at the teachers in the schools in the same light they did 2 years ago. Well, I don't find anybody who does. They wonder, these are people that live in their neighborhood, live next to them, they're relatives. They themselves even look and say, what the hell are we doing? What are we educating these kids on? What are we promoting? They certainly aren't talking anything good about the Second Amendment, but about all the common values that we as a community enshrine ourselves in. I mean, literally, they're being trashed. We have to pay attention to that and have to take action and speak out in regards to that. It's all about now, before we get to something that begins to look even more like Ukraine, we need to take action now to try and curb that and move it in a different direction. If we don't, we're going to be facing much larger problems than what we recognize right now.
Josh, let's finish the closing remarks and then we'll do a more informal discussion.
Okay, so I guess the closing thing for a two-way right, exercise your right, be trained. You don't want to need to use your firearm and not know how to use it, right? In the military, I used it a lot, right? I trained a lot. So I know, again, it's expensive, but there are cheaper firearms. And, you know, if you're a Glock person, you know, with the Glock 44, you know, 22, that is the Glock 17 or 19. You know, it's just a 22 version of it, so it's still the same motions and everything, right? And you get dummy rounds so that you can practice malfunctions, practice jams, blah, 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 all that stuff. But, you know, right now, I think we're at a good time where a lot of people are waking up and wanting to be involved in things, right? And this year is an election year. And for myself, I've been involved in elections since I was in high school, and I walked precincts for people, you know, back up in Rolling Meadows where I live when I was in high school, and then I did it in Alaska and in Kansas and in Hawaii and in Washington when I was out there in the military. But until I ran my own campaign, did I not realize how much work it takes, right? I in the last 3 weeks have collected 1,400 signatures to get myself on the ballot, and I would not have been able to do that if it wasn't for the 15 to 20 people that have been coming out to help me constantly the last couple of weeks. And we're only at the tip, right? We got to keep on pushing, and I'm going to have to continuously ask people for help until November, when so that we against Angela Gillespie, who is this woman is a communist. She is, like, you can look up her stuff. She supported she supported tax funded abortion, the red flag laws, and anything that we can possibly think of that we don't want. Let's support it. And I'd be willing to bet that a lot of your representatives and senators down here did too, right? And not only do we need to know our representatives and our state senators, but trustees are going to get elected soon. Your board members are about to get. There are 5 Supreme Court justices running. 2 of them I have on film saying that they say that the void card is a constitutional thing. 2 of them say that it is okay. Like I asked them that. Is this an okay thing? I said, yeah, it is. It is within the law, blah, 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 all this stuff. You can go on my YouTube channel and find it. Sat Media, you can go on our YouTube channel, you can find that. I don't know. Find somebody that's local that you like and help them with their campaigns. Please find somebody that's local and help them with their campaign. Because we can make change. We can change this. We can stop the tide that is pushing against us and continuously taking our rights away. I was born free. I will die free. My children were born free, and they will die free.
We're going to officially end right now, but I encourage you all to stay and continue the conversation. I definitely don't want to get in the way of this. But one last thank you to our panelists for taking the time to